Welcome to Life Stories 1, where we bring you incredible true tales of resilience and integrity. Today, we delve into the world of construction, where the very foundations of trust were shaken. Imagine spending 3 decades pouring your heart and soul into a company, ensuring every structure stood tall and true. That was Howard Ames, a man who lived by the blueprint. A 61-year-old field operations manager at Driftline Construction. He was the bedrock of their operations, ensuring buildings didn't just rise, but endured. But then a new wind blew in. Jordan Blake, a young chief operating officer, fresh from California with a vision of modern efficiency. He saw Howard not as a valued veteran, but as an outdated relic. Howard knew it in his gut. His long, esteemed career was about to be restructured right out of existence. Before we dive deeper into Howard's remarkable stand, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more compelling stories like this one. Howard Ames had dedicated his entire professional life to Driftline Construction, a tenure spanning 3 decades, with the last 20 years focused on overseeing every major commercial project in Columbus, Ohio. He kept his head down, his sites compliant, and his crews safe, never missing a deadline that wasn't disrupted by unforeseen circumstances like weather or supply chain issues. Yet, Jordan Blake, the new chief operating officer, barely 6 weeks into his role after joining from a tech company in California, viewed Howard as if he were an antiquated piece of machinery, a relic from a bygone era. Howard had been pouring foundations when Jordan was still in college. Jordan, without making eye contact, scrolled through his tablet and declared, "The board wants a restructuring plan by next quarter. We need to cut overhead and streamline the old processes." Howard simply nodded, acknowledging the stark reality. The meeting concluded with nothing decided, but everything understood. Howard's 3 decades of institutional knowledge were now dismissed as mere overhead, signaling his impending departure. Back in his cramped office, filled with filing cabinets and site maps, Howard opened his bottom drawer. Inside lay a thick blue folder, a compilation he had meticulously maintained for 8 years. It wasn't for this specific day, but rather an insurance policy against the moment someone made a catastrophic decision. Every corner cut, every inspection rushed, every permit manipulated. All were documented, dated, and annotated in his neat block handwriting. Not that he had committed these acts, he had consistently fought against them. But when executives made decisions from boardrooms about unrealistic timelines, he kept records. When work began before permits were cleared, he noted it. When materials deviated from specifications, he meticulously wrote it down. He observed Jordan shaking hands with a young man in an expensive suit, their laughter echoing towards his office. That's when Howard knew. 3 months had passed since their initial frosty encounter, a period during which Jordan Blake had tirelessly brought in consultants, held numerous closed-door sessions with the board, and hired 4 new managers, all under 40, all armed with business degrees rather than practical construction experience. The slow fracture that Howard had felt spreading through the company's foundation for years had finally reached his office door. Now, Jordan sat across from him, flanked by Vanessa from Human Resources, the setting devoid of any pretense of discussion. "Howard, we're restructuring the field operations division," Jordan began, his tone formal and devoid of personal warmth. "The company is moving toward a more distributed model of site supervision. We'll be eliminating the central field operations manager position and creating specialized team leads who report directly to project development." Howard's face remained neutral. He nodded slowly, acknowledging, not debating. This wasn't a conversation. It was a notification, a formal pronouncement. "After 30 years, the board feels you deserve a respectful transition," Jordan continued, his voice adopting a practiced, sympathetic cadence. "We're offering 6-month severance, extended health benefits, and consulting opportunities should specific projects require your expertise." Howard understood the translation perfectly. "We're firing you, but nicely." and we might call if we get desperate. He looked at Jordan directly, his voice steady. When would this take effect? Jordan glanced at his watch. Immediately. Today will be your last day in the office. Vanessa will help you with the paperwork and collecting your personal items. 30 years of unwavering dedication, of building foundations and ensuring safety, had culminated in a mere 15-minute meeting. Howard simply signed the papers, shook Jordan's hand with a neutral expression, and followed Vanessa to his office. As he packed his coffee mug and the framed photo of his late wife, Catherine, he saw Thomas Dree, Frank's son, watching from the hallway. Thomas offered a single nod, an acknowledgement, not an apology, before disappearing into the elevator. Howard took nothing from the filing cabinets. Those were company records. But his blue folder, his meticulously kept record of truth, he slipped quietly into his bag. By noon, he was sitting in his truck in the parking lot, keys in the ignition but the engine off. Through the windshield, the Columbus skyline stretched before him, 6 buildings he had helped construct standing tall against the clouds. He had given this company everything, missed basketball games with his son, worked weekends when Catherine was sick, lost himself in the job after she passed. For what? To be escorted out like obsolete equipment. He started the truck, but instead of driving home, he headed downtown, to the Office of Building Safety. 2 weeks passed, during which Howard heard nothing from Driftline or Gloria. He spent the time organizing his home office and fielding calls from old colleagues, all expressing shock at his sudden departure. The severance checks began to arrive, a decent sum, though less than initially promised when prorated over 6 months. Then, on a Tuesday morning, his phone buzzed. It was Jordan Blake. "Howard, I hope you're doing well," Jordan said, his voice overly casual, almost strained. "Listen, we're having some issues with the Riverside Plaza project, and I was hoping you might consult for a day or two." Riverside Plaza, the biggest project in Driftline's pipeline, a massive multi-use development with retail, offices, and luxury apartments. Ground had broken 3 months prior. "What kind of issues?" Howard asked, feigning ignorance. "Just some permit questions. The city inspector is making a fuss about modified plans that weren't resubmitted. Nothing major, but it's holding things up." Howard knew instantly Gloria had to be involved. "I'd be happy to help," Howard replied, his voice calm and firm. "My consulting rate is $300 an hour, 2-day minimum, retainer up front." Silence stretched on the line. "That's steep, Howard. We were thinking more along the lines of your previous salary equivalent." Howard chuckled inwardly. "That was an employee rate. I'm a consultant now," he countered, "and experienced consultants with my specific knowledge don't come cheap." More silence. "Let me talk to Thomas and get back to you." They called back the same day. It was Thomas himself agreeing to Howard's terms, though making it clear this was a one-time arrangement. Howard signed their hastily prepared contract and agreed to meet the project manager at the Riverside site the next morning. That afternoon, Howard called Gloria from his home office. "You've been busy," she said when she answered. "They asked me to intervene on Riverside," Howard replied. "I thought they might," she chuckled. "And will you convince me to overlook their creative interpretation of the approved plans?" "No," Howard said quietly, his voice firm. "I'm going to help you understand exactly what they've changed, when they changed it, and what other sites might have similar issues." The trap wasn't just Riverside. It was every active Driftline project in the city. Gloria and Howard met at a small coffee shop, far from both downtown and Driftline's offices. Howard brought his files, and Gloria brought hers. "After I read your documentation," she said, stirring her coffee, "I started pulling every Driftline permit application from the past 5 years, comparing approved plans with inspection reports. The pattern is clear." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos from 8 different construction sites, each showing subtle but significant deviations from approved plans. Extra square footage, modified structural elements, different materials than specified. They've been systematically building beyond permit approvals, she continued. Small enough changes that a rushed inspector might miss them, but significant enough to impact safety and compliance. Howard wasn't surprised, but seeing the evidence laid out was still jarring. This wasn't just cutting corners to save time. This was intentional, calculated violation of building codes. The next morning, Howard met Jordan at the Riverside site as promised. Jordan was anxious, pacing near the construction trailer. "Did you speak with Inspector Daniels?" he asked immediately, hope flickering in his eyes. "I did," Howard replied calmly. "We discussed the situation at length." "And can we continue work while the revised plans are processed?" Jordan pressed, eager for good news. "I explained the technical aspects of the modifications," Howard said carefully, detailing the setback changes, the drainage implications, the utility conflicts. Jordan frowned. "That doesn't answer my question, Howard." "She's following proper protocol, Jordan. The modifications are substantial enough to require full review. You'll need to pause work on the affected areas until approval comes through." Jordan's face darkened. "That's not what we brought you in for." "You brought me in for my expertise and relationships," Howard corrected him. "I provided both. My professional opinion is that the modifications require review, and my relationship with Inspector Daniels means she explained the process thoroughly rather than simply issuing a stop work order." "This is," he snapped, regaining his composure. "Thomas assured me you'd smooth this over." Howard maintained eye contact. "I've done exactly what my contract specified, consulted on the permit issues. My recommendation is to revert to the approved plans immediately or prepare for significant delays." Jordan stormed off to make a phone call to Thomas, undoubtedly. Howard used the opportunity to speak with the site foreman Luis, whom he'd known for 15 years. "They've got you building outside the permits," Howard said quietly. Luis looked uncomfortable. "Orders from above. They said the revised permits were coming." "They're not, and more inspectors will be visiting soon. If I were you, I'd make sure everything that is being built matches exactly what's on the approved plans. Nothing more, nothing less." Luis got the message. He'd been around long enough to know what was coming. Thomas called Howard that afternoon, his voice taut with controlled anger. "Jordan tells me you've decided not to help us with the Riverside situation." "I helped exactly as contracted," Howard replied. "I provided expert consultation on the permit issues." "Don't play games, Howard. You know what we needed." "You needed someone to help you circumvent building codes and permit requirements. That was never my job at Driftline, and it's certainly not my job as a consultant." Silence stretched between us. Finally, Thomas spoke again. "I've always respected you, Howard. That's why we offered such a generous severance, but if you're working against Driftline's interests now, we'll need to reconsider our arrangement." The threat was clear: back off or lose the severance. "Do what you feel is necessary, Thomas. I'll be doing the same." Howard hung up and immediately called Gloria. "It's happening. Thomas just threatened to cancel my severance." "We're ready," she replied. "Inspection teams are being assembled. We'll start tomorrow with Riverside, then hit the other sites throughout the week. They'll try to clean things up once they realize what's happening. That's why we're moving fast. And Howard, the city attorney, wants to meet with you. Your documentation is crucial to any potential enforcement action." The next morning, Howard watched from his truck across the street as Gloria arrived at the Riverside site with 3 additional inspectors and a city attorney. He could see Jordan's panicked expression, the rapid phone calls, the huddled conversations with site managers. By noon, construction had stopped completely. Workers stood in groups, uncertain what to do as inspectors methodically documented every deviation from approved plans. His phone buzzed with a text from Luis. "What the hell did you do?" Howard didn't respond. This wasn't personal. It was about doing the job right, even if he wasn't on the payroll anymore. 1 month later, Howard sat in the back row of the city council chamber as Gloria presented her findings. The room was packed: contractors, developers, Driftline employees, reporters. Thomas and Jordan sat in the front row, their attorneys flanking them. Gloria's presentation was methodical, devastating in its precision. Slide after slide showed documented violations across 12 Driftline projects, material substitutions that compromised structural integrity, expanded building footprints that violated setback requirements, foundations poured before permits were approved. These are not isolated incidents or honest mistakes, Gloria concluded. Our investigation, supported by extensive documentation from former Driftline operations manager Howard Ames, reveals a pattern of intentional code violations spanning at least 8 years. Thomas turned in his seat, eyes searching until they found Howard. The look wasn't angry, it was defeated. The city attorney stood next. Based on these findings, we've issued emergency stop work orders for all active Driftline projects. Additionally, we're requiring comprehensive inspections of all Driftline buildings completed in the past 10 years at the company's expense. The chamber erupted in murmurs. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist, this was potentially catastrophic for Driftline. Furthermore, the attorney continued when the room quieted, we've referred this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges regarding the falsification of permit documents. Jordan's face went pale. He'd signed many of those documents after taking over operations. Howard didn't stay for the rest. He didn't need to see Thomas making statements to reporters or Jordan huddled with attorneys. He didn't need to witness Driftline's public unraveling. As he walked to his truck, his phone rang. It was Peter Hammond, owner of Ashenbrook Supply Company, one of Driftline's competitors. "Howard," he said when Howard answered, "I heard what happened. We should talk. I need someone who knows how to do things right." 6 months later, Howard stood on the 19th floor of a half-finished office tower in downtown Columbus, watching as crews installed steel framing precisely according to specifications. The wind whipped around him, but he barely felt the cold. The city inspector signed off on the modified drainage plan. Megan, his new assistant at Ashenbrook Construction, said it was the most thorough documentation she'd ever seen. Howard nodded, satisfied. "Good. Schedule the concrete pour for next week, weather permitting, and make sure the environmental monitors are in place before they start." His phone buzzed, a news alert. He'd set up notifications for anything mentioning Driftline construction. The headline was brief. Driftline CEO Thomas Dray steps down amid ongoing investigations. He put the phone away without reading further. Driftline had survived, barely. The stop work orders had eventually been lifted on projects that could be brought into compliance, but the company had lost millions, its reputation shattered. Jordan had resigned 3 months ago, quietly returning to California. Howard's new office at Ashenbrook was smaller than his old one at Driftline, but he didn't mind. The title, Director of Compliance and Quality Control, came with authority to halt any project that deviated from approved plans. Peter Hammond had been clear. He'd hired him to keep his company honest, not to find shortcuts. As Megan and Howard rode the construction elevator down to ground level, she asked, "Do you ever regret what happened with Driftline? They were part of your life for so long." Howard considered this as they stepped onto solid ground. Around them, the construction site hummed with purposeful activity. Every worker, every beam, every bolt was exactly where it should be. "No," he finally answered. "I don't regret doing the job right. Never have, never will." He looked up at the rising building, straight, true, and built to last, just like it should be. Thank you for watching this powerful story of integrity and justice on Life Stories 1. If you were inspired by Howard Ames's unwavering commitment to doing what's right, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories 1 for more compelling true stories that will move and inspire you. Your support helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light.